It was a quiet evening in our suburban home. The television hummed faintly in the background, a cooking show neither of us was really watching. The clinking of Sophie's wine glass against the coffee table broke the monotony, followed by the constant tapping of her fingers on her phone. She sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly, her face lit by the glow of the screen. Her body was in the room, but her mind had been somewhere else for months now. I pretended not to notice, sipping my coffee as I tried to focus on the newspaper in front of me. But the silence between us had grown heavier over time, like an invisible wall neither of us dared to break. We used to talk about everything, work, dreams, stupid little things like which celebrity would make the worst dinner guest. Now, her attention was locked somewhere I couldn't reach. I cleared my throat. "You're quiet tonight," I said, hoping to spark a conversation. Sophie didn't look up. She murmured dismissively. That was the last straw. "Seriously, Sophie, is something going on with you? You've been distant." She finally put her phone down and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Actually, yeah, there's something I need to tell you." I set my coffee down, leaning forward. "What is it?" Her tone was unnervingly casual, as though she were announcing a change in dinner plans. "Babes, I'm going on a date tonight. With Charles, my boss." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. A nervous laugh escaped my lips. "Wait, what?" Sophie leaned back into the couch, tilting her head like she was explaining something to a child. "You heard me. Charles is my new lover. We've been seeing each other for a while now." The room seemed to tilt as the words sank in. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I was too stunned to speak. I stared at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, to indicate this was some kind of sick joke. But her face remained impassive, her smirk cutting through me like a blade. "You're joking," I said finally, my voice flat and unsteady. This isn't funny, Sophie." "Oh, relax," she said with a wave of her hand, like she was dismissing a tantrum. "Don't act so surprised, Oliver. You're boring, predictable. Charles is exciting. He makes me feel alive." Anger bubbled in my chest, threatening to spill over. "Sophie, are you even listening to yourself? We've been married for 16 years. 16 years!" I slammed my fist on the arm of the chair, startling even myself. "How long has this been going on?" She shrugged, reaching for a glass of wine. "A few months." My jaw clenched. "Months? And you didn't think to say anything? You didn't think I deserved to know?" She took a long sip of her wine, clearly unfazed by my growing rage. "Why bother? What would you have done? Whine about how I'm ruining everything? Beg me to stay? Please." I stood, the adrenaline coursing through me, making my legs feel unsteady. "You're not going anywhere tonight, Sophie," I said firmly, stepping toward her. "I'm not letting you throw away our marriage for some fling with your boss." Sophie sighed, as though my anger was inconveniencing her. She got up from the couch, brushing past me. "Oh, Oliver, grow up. I promised Charles a wild night, and I always keep my promises. Don't wait up." I followed her down the hallway as she headed to the bedroom. "If you walk out that door, Sophie, we're done. Do you hear me? Done." She opened the closet and started pulling out a dress, a red one she hadn't worn in years, a dress I'd bought for our anniversary. She tossed it on the bed and began rummaging through her jewelry box. "Oh, please," she said, not even turning to face me. "You? Divorce me? Don't make me laugh. You're too weak for that, Oliver. You'll come crawling back like always." I clenched my fists, my anger giving way to something far worse. Humiliation. "Is that what you really think of me?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "After everything I've done for you? For us?" She finally turned to me, her expression hard and unapologetic. "What have you done, Oliver? Paid the bills? Fixed the leaky faucet? Congratulations, you're a functional adult. But Charles makes me feel like I'm worth something. He doesn't just exist in my life, he excites me." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, searching for some trace of the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But she was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice trembling. Sophie laughed, a cold, hollow sound, The only mistake I made was wasting 16 years with a man who doesn't have a backbone. She grabbed the dress, disappeared into the bathroom, and slammed the door. I stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door as the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me. Part of me wanted to rip the door off its hinges, to scream at her, to demand answers. But another part of me, stronger, quieter, knew there was no point. She had made her choice. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she was dressed to kill. The red dress clung to her curves, her makeup was flawless, and her favorite perfume filled the hallway. She gave herself a once-over in the mirror, adjusting her earrings with a satisfied smile. "Last chance, Sophie," I said, my voice low but firm. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." She glanced at me over her shoulder, her smirk returning. "Oh, Oliver, you'll be begging me to come back." "You always do." She grabbed her purse, slung it over her shoulder, and walked to the front door. I followed her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Don't do this," I said one last time. She didn't even turn around. "Good night, Oliver," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. And with that, she opened the door, stepped outside, and disappeared into the night. The sound of her car pulling out of the driveway echoed in my ears. I stood there, staring at the closed door, my hands shaking. My chest felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. For 16 years, I had given her everything, my love, my loyalty, my trust. And she had thrown it all away without a second thought. But as the silence settled around me, something inside me shifted. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the anger, they all coalesced into something sharper, something cold and determined. I wasn't going to crawl back this time. Not again. If Sophie thought she could walk all over me and come back whenever she pleased, she was dead wrong. This time I was going to make her regret every single decision she had made. I turned away from the door, my mind already racing with plans. Whatever love I had left for her had died the moment she walked out that door. Now there was only one thing left to do. Take everything she thought she had won and leave her with nothing. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of the living room as I sat with a steaming cup of coffee. Sophie wasn't home yet. I imagined her lying in some hotel bed with Charles, maybe sipping champagne and laughing about the boring husband she left behind. That image didn't hurt anymore. It only fueled my resolve. She had underestimated me, treated me like an afterthought. But Sophie was about to learn that even the nicest man has his limits. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number. My real estate agent, Frank, answered on the second ring. "Hey, Oliver. Good morning. How can I help you today?" "Sell the house," I said, cutting straight to the point. There was a pause. "Wait, what? Did I hear that right?" "Yes, Frank. I want it sold immediately. I don't care about the price. Just get it done." "Oliver, this is very sudden." "Are you sure? This is your family home, man. You've been living there for years." I clenched my jaw. "I'm sure, Frank. I need it gone today. Can you make that happen or not?" Frank hesitated, but eventually sighed. All right. I'll list it as soon as I can. I'll call some buyers I know. But just so we're clear, you're serious about selling at any price?" "As long as it's fair," I replied. "I just need it sold quickly." Hanging up the phone, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The house had been ours, but Sophie had made it hers, decorating it to her taste, filling it with furniture she liked, always reminding me it was her dream home. Well, her dream was about to crumble. Next, I drove to the bank. It was a short trip, but it felt like a long one. I replayed her words from the night before in my head. "You're too weak. You'll come crawling back like always." I stepped into the bank, my resolve hardening with each step. Approaching the counter, I smiled at the clerk. "I'd like to empty my joint account." The young woman blinked at me. "Are you sure, sir? That's quite a large sum of money." "Yes, I'm sure." She nodded and tapped away at her keyboard, her fingers moving quickly. "Okay, I just need your ID and a signature here." I handed her my ID and signed the paperwork without hesitation. Within minutes, the funds were transferred into my personal account. As I walked out, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. Sophie had always been careless with money. shopping sprees, expensive dinners, designer bags. She thought I'd always be there to foot the bill. But now, she wouldn't see a single penny. The next stop was my lawyer's office. Sitting in the waiting room, I couldn't help but notice the irony of it all. 16 years of marriage boiled down to a few sheets of paper. I had built a life with Sophie, and now I was tearing it apart in a single day. Oliver, my lawyer Alan, called as he opened his office door. "Come on in." Alan was a sharp man, always dressed in a crisp suit, with an air of efficiency that made him the perfect lawyer. "I need you to prepare divorce papers," I said as soon as I sat down. "My wife cheated on me. I want this finalized as quickly as possible, and I don't want her getting anything." Alan leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. "Infidelity makes things simpler in cases like this. But I need details. How long has this been going on? Do you have any proof?" "She admitted it," I said, my voice flat. "Last night. Said she's been seeing her boss for months." Alan nodded. "All right. We'll need a written statement from you about what happened. I'll draft the papers and make sure you come out on top." "But Oliver..." "What?" He hesitated. "This will get ugly. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Sophie's mocking laugh, the way she walked out the door without a second thought. I've never been more prepared for anything in my life. By the time I left Alan's office, everything was in motion. The house was being sold. The accounts were emptied. The divorce papers were being drafted. All that was left was to deliver the final blow. When I got home, the emptiness of the house hit me. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, like all the life had been sucked out of it. But I didn't feel sadness or regret. I felt resolve. I grabbed a piece of paper from the kitchen drawer and wrote a short note. "You wanted freedom? You got it. The house is sold. The accounts are empty. The divorce papers are on the way. Don't bother trying to find me. I'm already gone." I placed the note on the kitchen counter, right where Sophie would see it. Then I packed a bag, just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, and my laptop. I didn't need much. This house, this life, it was all in the past now. As I stood by the front door, I glanced around one last time. The memories of laughter, arguments, celebrations, they all seemed distant now, like they belonged to someone else's life. The sound of Sophie's car pulling into the driveway made my heart race. I quickly grabbed my bag and slipped out the back door, moving silently through the yard. I didn't want to face her, not yet. I wanted her to walk into that empty house, see the note, and feel the weight of what she had done. I climbed into my car, parked a few houses down, and waited. From my vantage point, I could see her stumble out of the car. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, evidence of her wild night. She carried her heels in one hand and fumbled with her keys as she approached the front door. When she stepped inside, I imagined the confusion that would spread across her face. The silence, the missing belongings, the note. When Sophie walked into the empty house that evening, she likely thought it was some sort of prank. Her laughter echoed through the empty rooms as she shouted, "Oliver, where are you hiding? Come on, this isn't funny." She must have wandered through the house, searching for signs of me, my car in the garage, my clothes in the closet, or my laptop on the desk. But everything was gone. Her confidence carried her for a little while longer. After reading the note, she assumed it was a dramatic overreaction, something she could easily smooth over. I could almost hear her mocking tone when she left her first voicemail. "Very funny, babe. You really went all out with this one. What? Are you staying at a hotel to make a point? All right, message received. Just come home? Okay. We'll talk." Her arrogance was astounding. Even after everything she'd done, she believed she had control over me, that I'd eventually come crawling back like she'd predicted. But when the night passed without a response from me, the cracks in her composure began to show. It didn't take long. A few minutes later, Sophie burst out of the house, her phone pressed to her ear. I didn't need to hear her to know she was calling me. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Her name flashed across the screen. "Sophie." I let it ring. It rang again and again. Finally, she left a voicemail. "Oliver, what the hell is this? Where are you? What do you mean the house is sold? The accounts are empty? Are you serious right now? Call me back." I smiled to myself as I started the engine. Sophie thought she had won. She thought she could walk all over me and that I'd just sit there and take it. But she was wrong. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. Sophie had chosen her path, and now I was choosing mine. As I drove away, leaving behind the house, the memories, and the betrayal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Sophie wanted excitement, chaos, and drama. She wanted a man who made her feel alive. Well, now she had it, and she'd have to live with the consequences. The next morning, I checked my phone. 12 missed calls. 7 voicemails. Her tone was starting to shift. Oliver, where the hell are you? What's going on? Are you seriously ignoring me? Just call me back already. By the afternoon, the messages became more frantic. Oliver, what did you do with the money? The accounts are empty. What's happening? You can't just take everything. Call me back, damn it. I imagined her pacing the kitchen, tearing through drawers looking for bank statements, her mind racing as the realization set in. I wasn't bluffing. By the third day, the panic was undeniable. Her messages were no longer confident demands, but desperate pleas. Oliver, please. I don't know what's going on, but we can fix this. Just call me. We've been together for 16 years. I know we can work through this. Please, I'm begging you. I listened to her voicemails with a grim sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. She had always been the one to call the shots, to manipulate situations to her advantage. But now, the tables had turned. Meanwhile, her fantasy with Charles was unraveling. I knew it wouldn't last. Men like Charles weren't interested in long-term commitments, especially not with someone who came with baggage. From what I later learned, Sophie had moved in with Charles temporarily after realizing the house was being sold. At first, I'm sure she thought he would step in and play the role of her savior. But Charles was nothing like me. He wasn't interested in fixing her problems or offering her stability. One evening, she called again. This time, her voice was trembling, her confidence completely gone. Oliver, please, I need you. I made a mistake. Charles is not who I thought he was. He doesn't care about me the way you did. I should have appreciated you more. Please just come home. I'll do anything. I could picture her sitting on the edge of Charles's couch, her mascara smudged from crying, her voice trembling with desperation. But I was done being her safety net. I didn't answer. Over the next week, her calls became relentless. She begged, she cried, she screamed. Every voicemail told a different story. Oliver, I'm sorry. I was stupid, okay? I didn't mean any of it. You were right. I should have never walked out that door. Please, give me another chance. Oliver, pick up the damn phone. You can't just disappear like this. Do you know how humiliating this is for me? Oliver, I need your help. I'm losing everything. The house, the money, everything is falling apart. Please, just talk to me. But no matter how many times she called, I stayed silent. One evening, I got a message from an unknown number. It was Charles. Hey man, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Sophie's been blowing up my phone nonstop about you. Can you just deal with her? I've got enough on my plate. I laughed out loud. Sophie's perfect boss-turned-lover was already tired of her. The man she thought was her escape from our boring marriage didn't even want to deal with her when things got tough. A few days later, I heard from a mutual friend. You'll never believe this, they said. Sophie and Charles had a huge fight at his office. Apparently, she showed up unannounced, crying and causing a scene. Security had to escort her out. It didn't surprise me. Sophie had always thrived on drama, but without me to pick up the pieces, her life was spiraling out of control. Eventually, she resorted to showing up at places she thought I might be. One day, I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop downtown when I saw her through the window. She was walking quickly, her eyes scanning the street as if searching for someone. I ducked out the back door before she could spot me. Later that night, my phone buzzed with yet another voicemail. Oliver, I saw your car today. I know you're avoiding me. Please just let me explain. I wasn't thinking clearly, okay? I got caught up in the excitement, and I made a mistake. But we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Her desperation reached its peak about 2 weeks after I left. She showed up at Alan's office, demanding to know where I was. Alan called me immediately after. She's frantic, he said. Crying, yelling, making a scene. I told her I couldn't disclose your location, but she's not letting it go. What did she say? I asked. She's claiming she's changed, that she's sorry and wants to reconcile. But Oliver, she's only sorry because she lost everything. Don't let her guilt you into anything. I won't, I assured him. That night, Sophie left one final voicemail. Her voice was hoarse from crying, and I could hear the defeat in her tone. Oliver, I don't even know what to say anymore. I screwed up. I know that. I ruined everything, and now I have nothing. Charles kicked me out. I don't have the house, the money, or you. Please just call me, even if it's just to yell at me. I need to hear your voice. I didn't call her back. Sophie had made her choice the night she walked out that door. And now, she was finally facing the consequences. For the first time in years, I felt free. And as I looked at the life I was starting to build without her, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back. Sophie's life spiraled further out of control as the days turned into weeks. The confident, defiant woman who had walked out of my life was now reduced to desperate attempts to salvage the wreckage. Meanwhile, I was thriving in my newfound freedom. After selling the house and moving to a new city, I found a small apartment overlooking a bustling downtown area. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it felt like home, something my old life with Sophie hadn't felt like in years. I started focusing on myself for the first time in ages. Early mornings were spent at the gym, where I worked off years of frustration and stress. Evenings were reserved for hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage: reading, sketching, and occasionally trying my hand at cooking. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. Sophie, however, was drowning. Without the house, the money, or even Charles to fall back on, reality hit her hard. From what I gathered through mutual friends and social media, she'd been kicked out of Charles's apartment less than a month after moving in. Apparently, the exciting man she'd left me for had no patience for her constant demands. She's staying with her sister now, Alan told me during one of our calls. But even that's temporary. You know how Karen is. She won't put up with Sophie's nonsense for long. I couldn't help but smirk. Sophie had always relied on others to clean up her messes. But now, the safety nets were disappearing one by one. One evening, as I was heading home from work, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Oliver, it's Sophie. Please call me. I just need to talk to you. I stared at the message for a moment before deleting it. I had nothing to say to her. A few hours later, another text came through. This time, it was more desperate. Oliver, I know I don't deserve it, but please just hear me out. I'm sorry for everything. I need your help. I ignored that one too. The turning point for me came when I met Luna. We crossed paths at a bookstore downtown. I was browsing the nonfiction section when she bumped into me, nearly knocking a stack of books off the shelf. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, her cheeks flushing. It's fine, I said, catching the books before they fell. No harm done. We struck up a conversation, and within minutes, I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't in years. Luna was warm, genuine, and refreshingly down to earth. She didn't have the air of entitlement or manipulation that Sophia carried. We exchanged numbers that day, and over the next few weeks, we began seeing each other regularly. Luna had a way of making me feel seen, truly seen, in a way Sophie never had. She listened, laughed at my terrible jokes, and encouraged me to embrace the life I was rebuilding. Meanwhile, Sophie's downward spiral continued. She started calling more frequently, leaving long, rambling voicemails that alternated between apologies and anger. Oliver, I'm sorry, she sobbed in one message. I was stupid, okay? I ruined everything. Please, just give me another chance. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. In another, her tone was sharper, almost accusing. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Running away and leaving me to deal with all this crap. You're a coward, Oliver. A spineless coward. I didn't respond to any of them. Sophie's desperation reached its peak a few weeks later when she showed up at my new apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, her hair disheveled and her eyes red from crying. Oliver, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please just talk to me. I stared at her for a moment, debating whether to slam the door in her face or let her speak. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. The moment she stepped into the apartment, she started sobbing. I've lost everything, she said, collapsing onto the couch. The house, the money, Charles. I have nothing left. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. And whose fault is that, Sophie? Her head snapped up, her eyes filled with guilt. I know it's my fault. I was selfish and stupid, and I threw away everything we had. But Oliver, I'm begging you, please give me another chance. I'll do anything to make it right. I let out a bitter laugh. Do you even hear yourself? You didn't care about making it right when you were sneaking around with Charles. You didn't care about me or our marriage when you walked out that door. I was wrong, she said quickly. I see that now. Oliver, I was caught up in the excitement. I thought Charles was what I needed, but he wasn't. He was a mistake. You're the one I need. Her words might have swayed me once, but not anymore. I had spent too many years being manipulated by her lies, and I wasn't about to fall for them again. You don't need me, Sophie, I said firmly. You need someone to clean up the mess you made. But that's not my job anymore. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my hand. Please, Oliver. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. Stop, I interrupted, pulling my hand away. You don't get to beg for a second chance now. You made your choice, Sophie. Now you have to live with it. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered all the nights I had spent wondering where I went wrong, questioning whether I was good enough for her. I remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, and the pain. I think you should go, I said finally. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Oliver, please. No, I said firmly. This conversation is over. After she left, I sat down and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The encounter had stirred up old emotions, but I felt no regret about my decision. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. A few days later, I got a text from Sophie. I understand now. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything, I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my focus back to Luna and the new life I was building. Sophie was a chapter of my life that I had finally closed, and I had no intention of reopening it. As I sat with Luna later that evening, laughing over dinner, I realized how far I had come. Sophie's fallout was her own to deal with, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Sophie's betrayal had once felt like the end of my world. The pain, humiliation, and anger consumed me for weeks. But now, standing on the other side of it all, I realized it had been the catalyst for something far greater, a chance to rebuild, to truly live. My life with Luna was proof of that. Luna and I met on a chilly fall evening at a bookstore. I'd been browsing the shelves aimlessly, flipping through titles I wasn't particularly interested in, when she stumbled into me. Literally. Oh no, I'm so sorry, she said, crouching down to pick up the book she'd accidentally knocked from my hands. It's fine, I replied with a laugh. I needed an excuse to stop pretending I was interested in home repair guides anyway. She smiled, brushing her hair out of her face. Well, you could always just hire someone. That's what I do. Keeps me from accidentally setting my house on fire. We spent the next 15 minutes laughing and talking. She had this easy warmth about her, the kind that made you feel like you'd known her for years. It wasn't forced or manipulative, just honest and kind. When we exchanged numbers, it felt like a natural step, not the result of games or power dynamics. Our relationship grew in a way I hadn't thought possible after Sophie. It was simple, genuine. Luna didn't try to control or belittle me. She encouraged me to pursue the hobbies I loved, joined me on spontaneous weekend trips, and always met me halfway when we had disagreements. A year later, I proposed on a quiet beach at sunset. She said yes without hesitation, throwing her arms around me as tears of happiness filled her eyes. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family. Alan stood by my side as my best man, giving a speech so full of embarrassing stories from my youth that I thought I'd die of laughter. But it was perfect. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, Sophie, meanwhile, had taken a very different path. Mutual friends occasionally updated me on her life, though I never asked. Apparently, things had gone downhill after I left. Her affair with Charles had been the beginning of her unraveling. When he realized she wasn't the prize he thought she was, especially without my money and stability to fall back on, he dumped her. She had tried to move on, bouncing between jobs and short-lived relationships, but her reputation had preceded her. She's burned every bridge she had, Alan told me during one of our chats. Even her own family's tired of her crap. Karen kicked her out after she refused to pay rent. What's she doing now? I asked, not because I cared, but out of morbid curiosity. Last I heard, she's working at a diner downtown. Barely scraping by. Is not pretty, man. I didn't say anything. I didn't feel satisfaction or pity. Sophie had made her choices, and now she was living with them. One evening, about a year into my marriage with Luna, I ran into Sophie by chance. I was walking home from work when I spotted her sitting on a bench outside the diner Alan had mentioned. She looked different. Gone was the polished, confident woman who used to criticize my every move. Her hair was dull, her clothes plain and wrinkled. There was a tiredness in her face that hadn't been there before, as though life had weighed her down to the point of breaking. She didn't notice me at first, too busy staring at the ground, lost in thought. For a moment, I considered walking past without saying a word, but something made me stop. "Sophie," I said, my voice neutral. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening as she recognized me. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and something else, shame maybe. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "You look good," she said finally, her gaze darting to the wedding ring on my finger. "Thanks," I replied. "How have you been?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Not great, as you can probably tell." I didn't respond, and she seemed to take that as a cue to keep talking. "I've been thinking about you a lot," she said quietly. "About everything I did. I was such an idiot, Oliver. I threw away the best thing I ever had because I thought I deserved more. But I didn't. I didn't deserve you." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd once loved, the one I thought I'd spend my life with. But that woman had been buried beneath layers of deceit and manipulation long before our marriage ended. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected: closure. "I appreciate that," I said after a long pause. "I really do. But I've moved on, Sophie. I'm happy now, and I hope you find a way to be happy too." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "You deserve to be happy, Oliver. More than anyone I know." I gave her a small nod, then turned and walked away, leaving her behind for good. As I walked through the door of the home I now shared with Luna, she greeted me with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek. "How was your day?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. "Good," I said honestly, pulling her close. "Better now." And it was, for years, I had let Sophie's betrayal define me, shape my sense of worth. But not anymore. I had found something real, something pure in Luna. Sophie was just a chapter in my life, a painful one, but a necessary one. Without her betrayal, I might never have found the strength to rebuild, to grow, to find Luna. And as I sat down at dinner with my wife that evening, laughing over something silly she'd said, I realized I wasn't just moving forward. I was finally free. Years had passed since I'd last thought of Sophie. Life had moved on, and so had I. Luna and I had built a life full of love, trust, and laughter, far removed from the bitterness of my past. Our young daughter, Clara, was the light of our lives, a curious, bubbly child who seemed to bring sunshine into every room she entered. That morning, the air was crisp, and the autumn leaves painted the yard in vibrant shades of orange and gold. Clara was outside in the garden, chasing after a butterfly with the boundless energy only a 4-year-old could muster. I sipped my coffee at the dining table, savoring the peace of the moment. Luna walked in, her face glowing with the soft contentment I had come to adore. "You should see her out there," she said, setting a plate of toast in front of me. She's convinced that Butterfly is her new best friend. I chuckled. She's got your determination, that's for sure. Before Luna could respond, the doorbell rang. I frowned. We weren't expecting anyone. I'll get it, I said, standing up and heading toward the front door. On the porch was the mailman, holding a package and an envelope. Morning, Mr. Johnson. Special delivery for you. I thanked him, took the items, and returned to the dining table. Clara ran inside at the sound of the door closing, her cheeks pink from the cold. Who was that, Daddy? Just the mailman, sweetie. I set the package aside and opened the envelope. The moment I saw the handwriting, my stomach tightened. It was from Sophie. Who's it from? Luna asked casually, noting the shift in my expression. I hesitated, then shook my head. It's nothing important. Luna gave me a knowing look, but didn't press further. Instead, she gathered Clara into her arms and carried her upstairs to wash up, leaving me alone with the letter. The letter was thick, its weight forewarning the flood of emotions inside. I unfolded the pages and began to read. Dear Oliver, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I need to say these things, even if it's only for my own peace of mind. I've spent years trying to make sense of what I did, of who I was back then. I've replayed that night over and over in my mind, how I laughed in your face, how I walked out thinking I was untouchable. I was selfish, arrogant, and blind to the incredible man I had. And I lost everything because of it. After you left, my life fell apart in ways I couldn't have imagined. Charles dumped me the moment he realized I wasn't an asset anymore. I lost my job shortly after that. With no money, no home, and no one to turn to, I spent months barely scraping by. But the worst part wasn't losing the house, or the money, or even my reputation. The worst part was realizing how much I'd hurt you. I think about the life we could have had, Oliver. The life I threw away for nothing. And it haunts me every day. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I've spent every day since you left trying to become a better person, trying to fix the parts of me that were so broken. If there's even the smallest chance that you could find it in your heart to talk to me, to let me apologize in person, I would give anything for that. But if not, I understand. You owe me nothing. I hope you found the happiness you always deserved. With regret, Sophie. I stared at the letter, my emotions swirling. A part of me felt a faint pang of sadness, not for Sophie, but for the man I'd once been, the man who had loved her so deeply and received nothing but betrayal in return. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside me. It would remain there untouched, just like Sophie's place in my life. Later that afternoon, as I watched Clara playing in the yard again, Luna came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded. Yeah, just thinking. About her? Maybe a little, I admitted, but not in the way you think. It's strange, you know, how something that once felt so devastating can now feel like a distant memory. I don't even recognize the man I was back then. That's because you've grown, Oliver, Luna said, her voice steady. And because you finally let yourself be happy. I turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I wouldn't be here without you, I said. You showed me what love is supposed to feel like. She smiled, leaning into my touch. Well, I didn't do it alone. You chose to let go of the past. That was all you. I pulled her into a kiss, a deep sense of gratitude washing over me. Later that evening, after Clara had gone to bed, I sat down in my study with a drink in hand. My mind wandered back to Sophie's letter. I didn't hate her anymore. That part of my life, the anger, the bitterness, the need for revenge, was behind me. But forgiveness? That was something else entirely. Forgiveness wasn't just about words. It was about trust, and Sophie had destroyed any foundation of trust we'd ever had. As much as she might have changed, as much as she might regret her choices, I couldn't let her back into my life. The wounds might have healed, but the scars would always remain. My thoughts were interrupted by Luna's voice from the doorway. Coming to bed? Yeah, I said, setting the drink down and standing. I'll be right there. She smiled and disappeared down the hall. I glanced at the drawer where Sophie's letter now sat, then turned off the light and left the room, leaving the past where it belonged. The next morning, as Clara climbed into my lap at breakfast and Luna handed me my coffee, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Sophie's betrayal had once defined me, consumed me with pain and anger. But not anymore. My life now was full of love, laughter, and hope, a future I could never have imagined back then. I had moved forward. I had won. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly free,